Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a wonderful, brilliant weekend and that FPL treated you well. Today, I have for you my Game Week 11 transfer plans, albeit in a slightly different style, yet again, due to my own unique situation. We will have the match analysis from the games, we will have specific player insights, and much, much more. If you could consider subscribing, if you haven't already, I would be very, very grateful. For those of you who watch regularly, which is about 50% of you that haven't clicked the button, could you just check if you've pressed it? And if not pressing it, that would be much, much appreciated. There isn't much that needs to be said before we get into the theme, however, so let's get into it. As is becoming a common theme, we will start with Sels Supremacy yet again in a week which is low scoring compared to what most thought, in a week where not too many of my players are returned. Again, he comes up trumps and delivers a 6-pointer, a relatively safe 6-pointer, where Sam had one chance, which we'll talk about in the match analysis section. But apart from that, he did very, very well for me yet again, and I had an easy ride towards the points. Easy hold for myself going into Newcastle at home, unless I am to wildcard. Speaking about Sels, if you are to wildcard, I'd probably look at relinquishing him. Now, I mean, yeah, sure, Newcastle at home is decent for a seeding especially, but they've still got a lot of attacking quality. Then you've got Arsenal away, and sure, you have Ipswich at home, but it's sandwiched between Manchester City away and then United and Villa as well. So I think his run in my team is coming to an end, which is sad. It's very, very likely to be his last week, or he may have already had it. But for what he's done, he's been absolutely magnificent. And you know what? It's not the worst hold ever. Even though the fixtures aren't there, given the form that he's been in, given the form that Forest have been in, given the way they play, he would still be a decent hold. Albeit I do think it's time to target some fixtures. In terms of the rank, because we haven't discussed that yet, a green arrow up to 120k, chopping about 70k off it. A decent week. We've obviously got Fulham, Brentford, and a lot of people have coverage there, which I don't, so that should be interesting. Specifically, Brian and Mbeumo, and then a bit of Jimenez as well in terms of the effective ownership, but managing to fade them, and it should stay a fairly healthy green going into the last week before the international break. So yeah, happy with the rank so far, especially considering no chips being used. I think that's a huge thing, and obviously delighted with Sels doing the business yet again. In general, this section is primarily for looking at the player in particular. I'm not talking so much about the game because we will do that when we get onto the match analysis section. Gabriel, I mean, really easily could have kept a clean sheet, to be honest. Newcastle didn't really create much apart from that one chance, but it was very, very well taken from Isak. And one thing I've noticed with him, and I think this is a really, really important point of discussion, since Mikel Merino has come to the side, I've seen the set pieces be tweaked slightly, and Merino actually looks the biggest box threat in comparison to anyone else, and specifically Gabriel. Even Havertz, who I own now, is usually either making a front post run from the direct free kicks, which are in swingers in general, and from corners, he's blocking the goalkeeper, and that's not great for his goal threat. And I think Merino is brilliant in the air as well. And they've tweaked it now that they have his threat as well, not to just make it solely focused on Gabriel. And I don't think that's good for his attacking output. So that is something we're certainly going to touch on when we look at the transfer plans, and as he is part of potentially being removed. Sorry, I'm still a little bit under the weather. I've had that cough that I've had for a long time. If I keep cutting the video, we'll be here for a very, very long time. Vardio, my savior, yet again. Him, Sels, Salah, and Rodgers have just put my team on their back for a few weeks now, right? They've been absolutely brilliant. A stunning header. I would say he was lucky to get this, right? Bournemouth could have scored more. He didn't have too much attacking threat in this game, but again, so happy with him. And even though the fixtures aren't actually great for him, like, let's say you're to wildcard, right? And in 12, you've got Spurs, Liverpool, Forest. I still don't think I'd take him out just because of the attacking upside, and I'd like him down the line. And he's just so nice to have in the weeks where they're not playing the best team, and you can rotate within your own defenders. Konsa, honestly, at halftime, I was thinking, yeah, I fancy a clean sheet here, and we'll talk about the game when we get to the section, but they just absolutely collapsed after they took Morgan Rodgers off. The first goal was just a lapse in concentration. I think it's very poor from them defensively. It was a very good cross, albeit from Son. But yeah, just completely collapsed without Rodgers on the pitch. And in the end, I guess Spurs deserved winners. But let's go on to the midfield now, which is a little bit more interesting. Now, I must say, whilst I don't think I will ever complain about FPL, because I know that in the end, well, at least in my opinion, whatever luck you get, you deserve. So, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I've spoken about that on this channel previously, that what appears to be bad, it's not always bad. So these two blanking could potentially help me down the line in some way, and I'm sure it will. But from a more practical standpoint, one which more people would agree with, both Garnacho and Foden were very unfortunate not to get it. At least to return, but honestly, both could have had hauls. Garnacho had two good chances in the Man United game. One, which was set up by Rashford from the cross, which was dummied. The second, which Bruno Fernandes cut back for him, mishit both. He had that. I thought he scored a screamer at the end. nearly. And in general, he could have got an assist as well for Xerxes at the end. And there were a couple of other passes that he could have played. So yeah, he could have had a haul, but comes away with nothing. Foden, we'll leave him for the match analysis section because he's a really interesting prospect and someone who I'm actually looking forward to owning for at least another week, hopefully. Rodgers gets the goal of the corner, 9 points at his price tag. This guy's been absolute gold dust ever since he got that first return against Wolves. Just brilliant. Played so well again. Could have been supported by his teammates a bit more. I thought John McGinn again. I'm not too happy with him in this Villa side at the moment. We'll touch on that. And I think he's actually limiting Rodgers to an extent as well in a indirect way, which we'll come on to. Salah, he actually had a few chances in the game. So I think to walk away with a 9-pointer is certainly fair, even though Liverpool didn't have the greatest of first halves. That goal he scored, again, just showing his quality. And like I said, I don't want to spend too much time on this section because it's more relevant for me to come on to it in the match analysis section where we can speak about it as a whole. Hall getting a very, very surprising 8 points, but looks to be nailed in this Newcastle side now. If he was trusted to defend against Saka, he'll be trusted to defend against anyone. And given his on-the-ball quality compared to Lloyd Kelly, I can't imagine him being dropped anymore. So having him at 4-3 is actually quite a nice option just to keep in the squad. And someone you guys should potentially keep in mind on Wildcard 12 because their fixtures do swing. I'm glad we got the call about captaincy right because I think Holland did blank. He shouldn't have. He really shouldn't have, but he did again. Again, we'll come on to the match analysis section. And these three, as a front line, they're all really out of form at the moment. Havertz has 3 blanks in a row. Haaland has 1 goal in his last 5. Calvert-Lewin has no return since I bought him. And yeah, this is basically where I've been. Like, this is the only reason I would say that my rank is not sky high at the moment, this front line, because they have failed me week on week on week for the last 6 weeks, I would say, 5-6 weeks. And yeah, I guess that's my own fault. Like, I would have gone Woods in game week 5. That was always the plan, but I was 0.2 off it. I knew that he was a better asset than Calvert-Lewin, but maybe I shouldn't have gone Calvert-Lewin. Maybe I should have gone Vardy. Havertz, I was very insistent on keeping and not shifting funds out of him, and I've been punished for that. And to be fair, I can't really blame myself for Haaland, right? I don't think anyone expected this, but a bad karma after the Arteta comment. We will come on to them from a structural standpoint and whether I'll be looking at taking them out soon in the transfer plan section. But now let's get into the match analysis. But like I said, happy with the rank. And overall, considering no chips, it is a very, very strong start. Right, what I would say is always my favorite part of this video. Now, Bournemouth versus City, I have watched the whole game. And again, I see the same thing that I saw against Wolves. It was interesting. Foden, especially in the first half, started off playing on that wider right role, on the right wing. But in general, was fairly fluid, and in the second half played inside a lot. But when Bernardo and Gundo were in the middle, again, I thought it was so poor. It lacks so much threat. The speed at which everything is done, the creativity from the middle, it doesn't help. To be honest, Matthias Nunes was actually like good at left wing, right? He's put in another good performance. I thought he was good against Southampton as well, but he still doesn't carry the same 1v1 threat that Doku does. I think his is just another level. And again, I say that Nunes plays well. So to have such limited threat from the wide areas, relatively speaking to what they normally do, and then have these two in the middle, I just don't think that it's a dynamic which Pep will persist with because it hasn't been working. However, when Foden comes into the middle, honestly, I thought he looked really sharp compared to maybe what the media portrayed for his performance, or even the highlights, like the Sky Sports 3-minute highlights. They really didn't do him justice either. And I think even against, it wasn't so much Southampton, Wolves, when he came on, he was sharp. So for me, a haul is coming with him because I look at the dink cross he plays into Haaland in the first half, could have had a return there. I look at the one that Haaland could have played into him in the first half in the box, could have had a return there. 2 snapshots, one which gets cut back for him by Nunes, which he puts past the right corner. Same in the last minute of the game where I really thought it was in. Could have had the assist for Haaland when he dinked it into the back post at the end of the game. So there were so many instances, and in general, I just thought the actions and general performance was sharp. So for me, I would say that he's quite an easy hold in most cases, and a return will be coming pretty soon. Having Walker instead of Lewis this game, I'd say this is one of the worst games to drop Lewis. Now, on the flip side, you have to, I guess, consider the fact that Walker had Semenyo on his flank, and did you really want Lewis versus Semenyo? Probably not, because that transitional threat is huge, that physicality, the 1v1 threat. But then on the ball, the retention, the small space ability, the progression, that Lewis can help you with so much. And when you have Gundo Bernard in the middle, I think you need that to an extent. So I guess it's what you're looking at in terms of the trade-off. Maybe you play the right centre back in a bit of a wider channel. You get Lewis inverting not so much into a 3-1-6, but you actually build with a very regular 3-2. And Lewis really comes inside, so you can have the channel defending done a lot easier as opposed to narrower. And then have a centre back in the middle, but he didn't opt for that, and I think City were punished to an extent. Holland, like I mentioned, he could have had a couple snap chances and the really good one at the end. We'll come on to whether you should be keeping the faith in the transfer plan section. Bournemouth, so impressive, right? That high press. They didn't really have to defend too deep, like for the first 70 minutes. They were so aggressive. They kept themselves up the pitch. They maintained territory well. The midfield was really good. They transitioned very well. And in general, like I've mentioned so many times, at home, they're going to be a very difficult side to beat. So that's that game. Ipswich probably should have got their first win of the season. Bit unlucky. It was a really good bit of quality from Leicester as a whole to win the ball back, the recovery run, the bit from Ayew and Vardy. I guess it's deserving of a point, that play alone, but in terms of the performance as a whole, Ipswich probably considered themselves a little bit unlucky. Leeds Davis showing that quality again, and why you look to pick defenders who have high attacking upside. Now, for me, I was never bullish on him. I always advise not to buy him. I guess this week is a big week, 10-pointer, right? So you could say I was wrong, but this game aside, you were never really expecting them to keep clean sheets. And I think when you are going to buy defenders with attacking upside, you should always be looking at having at least some clean sheet potential. And I think Ipswich just have very little outside of this game. So yeah, I wouldn't read too much into this game. I still think both of these two sides in particular are the ones to target at the moment. But what I would say is Vardy looks like he's still very sharp. And I think the fixture run in a couple of weeks after Chelsea game actually turns pretty good. Even the Chelsea game is not that bad for him. So I think he could be a decent source of points at a very cheap price tag. Now, in terms of the other teams, I would say Arsenal have close to optimal conditions, or they couldn't ask for too much more in terms of having an easier run at the league this season. But they are making it very difficult for themselves. Now, I know they've had injuries, but I don't think that's necessarily an excuse when it comes to the standard of performance that we've seen at Bournemouth, standard of performance we've seen at Newcastle, and even the second half against Liverpool to an extent. They've really thrown points away, I feel. Havertz playing this false right 8 role is a big no-no for me personally. Now, you can call it what you like. You can call it a 9 who drops into a right-sided 8 pocket. You can call it a false 9, but I'm going to call it a false right 8 just because I think he spends so much time there, and that's the main issue, the right 8 role. Him dropping into there means that no one occupies the centre-backs. There's no threat in behind for them. And build-up has to be so precise because you have no one who's able to run off the last line, and no one to hold up when you put it into them, and no one to dominate that central area. So you're really shooting yourselves in the foot just because you are reducing the amount of options you have. And what you have to do now is you have to be so precise because you have even more way to get up the pitch, okay? And doing this, I think, has stifled Arsenal's attack significantly. You see in the second half when they don't do this and Havertz goes back to playing a normal number 9, they at least had more threat, I felt like. I felt like more was going to happen. And a couple of crosses, if they were just a little bit closer to Havertz, they would miss them by just a little bit. Completely different story for the game. Rice scores at the end, completely different story. And then just in general, they just look more threat. They obviously haven't had a creative in the middle. And I think bringing on Ait-Nouri was important and a good decision. And I wonder if he will start the next game against Chelsea, albeit that is a very difficult game to put an 18-year-old into. And that would certainly be a baptism of fire. What Newcastle did was so well was limit the biggest Arsenal threat by a mile, and that was Saka, doubling up, tripling up. And what I would say is every single time I watch a big Arsenal game and it's not going so well, the only thing I always think of is just get Saka the ball more, get Saka the ball more. Because when you do, things happen because he is the best creative right wing in the league alongside Salah. But when he's tag team like this, it's very difficult for Arsenal to pretty much get anything going. And that has been an ever-present and something that's been consistent out of so many big games that I've seen, not just this year, but in times gone by under Arteta's reign. So I'm expecting an Arsenal shift in terms of the strategy and structuring within the side and just the system, because if this persists, big sides will know how to figure them out. You limit Saka and you limit a lot of Arsenal. Even if Havertz is to go into 9, you limit Saka, you limit a lot of Arsenal. Personally, I would say they change this against Chelsea, and the matchup for Havertz is actually quite decent because Chelsea definitely are one of the sides you can get at. We'll talk about this when we come on to Super Sunday, something that I thought about how to get at Chelsea. But yeah, they really do need to change it because if they persist with it, then they're in trouble. From a defensive standpoint, it's fine. Like, they conceded one chance. Overall, I thought they were good defensively. It was just a very well taken goal on the brilliant cross. Eddie Howe's put in another very good coaching performance. He did it against City with his 5-4-1. He's done it again against Arsenal. And their formula is simple and it's very reflective of where the Premier League is at the middle. huge engines in midfield, mass dueling capacity, very physical profiles all across the pitch, huge defensive output from the wingers, and then you have the quality of Isak and Gordon. As that showed, you need that quality when you face sides that are just going to have more of the ball against you, and obviously huge transitional threat as a component of that. So yeah, very, very good. Everton were flat again, just like they were against Fulham. I thought the build-up patterns were really poor. I think their insistence of going long at the frequency they do is just, for me, I would say irrational to an extent. I know Sean Dyche knows way more than me about football, but I disagree with the approach, and it is my channel, so I'm just giving my opinion. I think one thing that sides could learn about, and we'll speak about this a lot more with Chelsea, is slower build-up in the first and second phase is something that's going out of the game to an extent, given everyone wants to progress through the middle so quickly. And I don't think you need to, because teams come onto you. You play slower, and they'll come onto you even more, and that's what opens the pockets up, and that's how you can punch the ball between the lines quicker, and that's how you can turn teams over, especially when you have your quality players within the middle on the half turn, and they go receiving in the pockets, receiving in small spaces, small space ability, which is so important nowadays. All of these things, I think, are beneficiaries of initial slow build up in the early phases, but we haven't really seen too much of that. I think if Everton do that, honestly, they'll be so much better for it. Southampton, good on them. I'm happy they got a win because, like I said, there's a lot of talent in that squad, and they deserve this, I'd say, for the way they played this recently. And yeah, I think especially if Everton are going to play like this long, you want a different type of set of profiles, and just I think you want a bit more quality at right wing. I think you want a box crasher like at number 10. I think you want a bit more speed in the side as well if you're going to play like this, just to get in and behind and have a bit more physicality to win knock-ons, just aside from Calvert-Lewin. So yeah, I personally think they should change it. But if they don't, I wouldn't be particularly concerned about having your defensive assets against Everton because they shouldn't concede. A tale of two halves for Liverpool. You go on social media after the first half and they were getting slated for one of their poorest halves of this season. And it shows you the level of Brighton. It shows you the quality of Hurt's coaching. But they started to fall away in the second half. It does require a lot of running. And I think they maybe got a little bit fatigued with that system. And obviously, Liverpool have so much quality. I think it shows, though, that you can get at Liverpool. And as a result, benching attackers against them, you don't necessarily need to do just because their defensive record has been so good so far and they've kept a lot of clean sheets. Like, it is still possible to get at them, even with this narrower build-up. And in general, slightly deeper line and the pivot in front to protect the back four, etc. And it's harder to transition against them as a result of the narrow back four. And if you are to do so, you have to exploit the wide areas. You can't get in the half spaces as much. Can't move their centre backs into channels where they don't want to be, etc., right? But some of the attacking patterns of play from Brighton and just some of the general quality, 1v1 quality, one-on-one quality, individual quality was really good from them in the first half. And as I mentioned so many times, when you get Brighton, you see them on that fixture list, it's just goals and goals. Like, you're going to concede and you're going to score pretty much. And I think it's going to happen pretty much every Brighton game if they continue to play like this. Salah is genuinely something we've never ever seen before because we've never seen a right winger perform like this. And that's why I gave him the first section in my Everything You Need to Know video this week. And this is what I think is essential. It doesn't really matter too much the conditions for him because he's so good at football. He'll just do it himself. He'll find something. Like, what a well-taken goal. He is a joke. And I think if you don't have him, you're really just going to struggle this season because you're going to have to fight against a guy who'll be close to 100% EO pretty much every week. And he's just going to be putting up at least like high single figures or hauls. And starting behind the 8 ball every single week will probably get a little bit draining, especially as you move out of Haaland. I think it'll be pretty easy. Definitely easy to get him. So I would consider doing so. It was interesting because I don't think Liverpool transitioning were like as good as you probably expected them to be against Brighton. And I wonder if the heavy metal rock and roll football leaving them maybe has made them slightly worse in that regard. And they actually a lot more competent in the regard of like how they play within that slower build up and in that realm. But maybe the transitional quality has gone down slightly. I think not having a creative in the middle as well, like a real creative passer, like a Cole Palmer, for example, makes it harder because Szoboszlai isn't that type. He gives you so much off the ball and carrying, but not so much that passing. But anyway, that's for we'll talk about that when we get to the Game Week 11 videos. In terms of the matchups, Forest up to third, and good on them. Someone I spoke about preseason quite a bit, probably my team to watch in preseason, and they are doing magnificently well. Nuno Espirito Santo, again, with a very good, what I would say is a mature coaching performance. Doesn't go all guns blazing, still keeps that structure there, makes them very difficult to beat. One chance for West Ham in the game, and that's pretty much it. But there's a lot to like about Forest. The dueling capacity of their fullbacks, how robust they are. You specifically watched the game against Liverpool, and they did so well 1v1 for so long in that game. And that's when I knew. I was like, okay, cool. Like, this is a team that's going to be very difficult to beat. Marilla's anticipation is one of the best I've seen for a long, long time. His ability to read the game and understand where the ball is going to be and when it's going to be there, his temporal and spatial understanding elite, is so good, honestly. Like, watch out for that next time you watch it. So impressive, and not something you see too much because not as many defenders are as aggressive as him and willing to enter certain spaces. Milenkovic's overall physicality and how much he's helped them from set pieces and just in terms of aerial threat, both defensively and offensively, brilliant. Anderson's quality in the middle, Wood in the how he's dominating that central zone, his quality of finishing, his understanding of where to be and when to be there, box threat, great. And you've got the wingers as well. You've got Gibbs White. So this is a team that just in general will they'll be very difficult to beat and they'll do quite well. Now, of course, they lack certain qualities in certain areas and a certain ceiling of quality, I would say, against the better sides, but they are going to be very difficult to beat. And you shouldn't really be expecting to score too many goals against them when your assets come up against them. Wolves' assets are certainly on the menu. You look how good at Cunha played yet again. He is such a top quality player who's absolutely ready for a top 4 club, in my opinion. And Ryan Ait-Nouri's huge threat was there. And I would say, in general, with Wolves' run, these two in particular, they're just going to get points. Their floor is going to be very high. And at their price tag, that's a very safe option to go for. And we're actually going to speak about both of those two in my transfer plan set. I was going to move on to Super Sunday, but I didn't speak about West Ham too much, so I thought I'd touch on them. Again, just not good enough. The system is so unsupportive of the profiles they have in this squad. He seems somewhat stubborn and unwilling to change it. And honestly, I think you can just keep getting at him. Obviously, West Ham and Everton play each other, and that's two teams that are very much out of form and have, from a systematic perspective, and how their coaches interacting the system with their personnel has looked pretty poor in recent times. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when they go up against each other. But if this continues to persist with West Ham, you can continue to target them, especially players who play centrally against them. Those are the ones who are going to exploit because of the gaps, the spaces when they press, the lack of physicality in the middle, the transitional threat you pose when you're a good carrier, when you're a good athlete, when you're a good progressor against them. You've got a big opportunity for Hawes. And if you just think about it, Wood scored, Jackson and Palmer, well, Jackson hauled big against them, against Central. Palmer, Central. There's just loads of other games where Rodgers had a brilliant game against them. There's so many. Haaland scored a hat-trick against them. Like, against them, central players. And yeah, Palace are pretty interesting. I don't want to call them irrelevant in terms of FPL at the moment, but they kind of are. Like, are you buying their assets? Probably not. You would have looked at Eze this week, but now the fixture run has lost the Wolves fixture. They're missing. He's going to miss this one as well. That's coming up in Gameweek 11. So then the fixture run starts to die down a little bit after that. A team that you're probably not going to blow off the park, a team that you're probably going to score a couple goals against, they'll pose some attacking threat as well, albeit not like too much. And yeah, just a side that's very much in the middle to like middle lower quartet. A very interesting Super Sunday, which certainly had loads of different segments to it. Now, when it came to Spurs Villa, I thought, by the way, I missed the first 20 minutes in the game, and I heard Spurs were a little bit more on top. But when I turned it on, at least, Villa definitely had the better of the first half. I think Rodgers, again, shows you like his carrying ability in the middle is not unmatched in Premier League, but it is absolutely brilliant. It's a mass weapon. And you saw what happens when he gets taken off. Villa almost collapsed. One thing, I don't want to single them out. I don't really like criticizing players on here, but I think it's important for the purpose of FPL for you at least understand where I'm coming from. I really don't like McGinn in this side at the moment. I spoke about this a number of weeks ago. I'm not sure if I tweeted it out or if I spoke about it here, even if it was in a group chat with a friend. But he doesn't offer enough on the ball, whereby I feel like he supports what Rodgers does. And then, okay, fine, you get some defensive output, you get some level of retention, but I don't think it's enough. I'd rather have less off the ball, transfer that responsibility to the rest of the side or in the form of the system, and have a Leon Bailey on that right side. And I think if he keeps playing there, he's limiting Villa somewhat. And that's something to keep in mind with their overall goal threat. They were good in the first half, and Spurs really didn't look like scoring from what I saw. In the second half, obviously, they concede that first goal. Slight lapse of concentration, also really good quality from Son. But yeah, when Rodgers came off, they completely collapsed. Just a few moments where very poor discipline, good bit of play from Spurs. But I think they just lacked that sense of domination and physicality in the middle, even with Onana. So yeah, in terms of Spurs, I thought Brennan Johnson looked sharp yet again. Like just the positions he's taking up, considering he's a right winger in our system. Again, good on owners for getting that goal. You probably deserved it. Solanke really didn't have much for like the first 70, and and then obviously comes away with a brace and an assist. Really well taken finish. Good goal on the break / transition when Richarlison cut back from him, then he gets the assist from Maddison. It's really interesting because they obviously have Ipswich at home next. But at the same time, I don't think the performance was one which warranted a 16-pointer necessarily for at least for 70 minutes. But that is what you're going to get out of a number 9, an Ange number 9. They're always going to be in and around there. And I think now we can go back to the point that an Ange number 9 is always going to be a very high floor asset. Whether his ceiling's still there, I'm still undecided. I would like to see it at least once more and just have a bit more general threat in the game. But good signs for owners of Spurs assets, and I would really like them for the Ipswich at home fixture. The United versus Chelsea game was pretty boring, if being honest. I thought it was a low-quality game. United should have done what, in my opinion, what I was speaking about earlier. I think Chelsea come onto you a lot, and I think when you can punch the ball between their lines, or you can even play outside of their press to an extent, you can get your wingers involved early and one-on-one, fairly high up the pitch. And I think if a lot of teams just started building slow in that second phase, and then really speed it up, and then you want to punch it between the lines when they come onto you, I think that makes more sense as opposed to punching it into your pivot or your 6 and making them receive when other players are in closer proximity to them, and that too many of them, so that they can close them down quicker, and it's hard for them to release or burst pass or take it on the half turn. That's just a bit niche piece of analysis I throw in there. Bruno, he looked more comfortable already, I think, in this role. I think the shackles were off a little bit. You saw a bit more of the creative side of Bruno Fernandes. And you have to remember it was Chelsea, so not an easy game in which to do so, especially when you have Caicedo and Lavia protecting in the middle. Cole Palmer looked brilliant. Yet again, probably the best player on the pitch outside of Caicedo. So he's just going to be... And I think he got a bonus point without returning. So that kind of sums it up, right? He's going to be absolutely brilliant going forward. I think Palmer and Bruno... it's back to old school FPL. 90 minutes, penalty takers, set pieces. Let's get them going. Obviously, Bruno's got Leicester at home, Ipswich at home, Everton away. Palmer's got the Arsenal at home, which isn't too bad considering it's at home. And then the fixture run starts. Getting them in your side, I think, will be great. I like what I saw from Jackson still in terms of positioning, in terms of the runs he made. Palmer, with this level of passing, is always going to be able to find him at least once during a game against the Leicester sides. So there's that. And there's probably not much else to say apart from that. Man United and Chelsea, their assets, you're going to be looking to jump on board. Garnacho, in terms of the end product, like I spoke about, was poor. But with the minutes and the volume of chances, he should be fine. And the ones I'd really be looking at, Bruno, Palmer. You can look at Man United defensive assets as well in terms of Ruben Amorim coming in. So Dalot playing wing back, De Ligt's box threat, Anana and Sanchez's high ceiling, and then also Nicolas Jack. Right, now we can move on to my transfer plans. And I said it would be done in a slightly different way. And it has to be because I'm viewing this week and my strategy as in a different way than I have done so far. I don't think we've had too many weeks where you look at 3-4 fixtures and you think, okay, I want this asset, this asset, this asset that I all don't own. But this week, I look at Spurs versus Ipswich, and I would love a little bit of Porro. I'd love a bit of maybe Solanke, Son for sure, Brennan Johnson. I look at Man United Leicester, and I think Bruno, yeah, I would really like him. Really, really like him for that fixture. Then, who else is there that I don't have? You've got Wolves versus Southampton. Ryan Ait-Nouri, yeah, that would be brilliant. Cunha, that would be brilliant. So those are the 3 fixtures where I think there's a lot of upside. But at the same time, where else do I think there's upside? In that 4th fixture, I think City versus Brighton. And I've got Haaland, I've got the captain armband on him at the moment, and I've got Brighton. But given I've only got 1 free transfer, which is a bit of a pain, I've still got Gabriel, who I think might concede. I've got Havertz, who, whilst the matchup is pretty good, Arsenal systematically have been out of sorts for him. And he's quite expensive. He holds lots of cash. DCL for obvious reasons. I've also got Konsa playing next week, and that 2 against Salah. I'm happy to own Rodgers. That's no problem for me. And then other people, especially with the way a lot of other sides are geared, they've got a lot of Son and Solanke and Bruno and Cunha. And they've got routes. I only really have the route to take Havertz and downgrade him to Cunha, but I don't even mind having Havertz this week. I also then have the City, I guess, I wouldn't call it a problem, opportunity. But if that goes well, my whole week, if that goes wrong, my whole week is gone. And I am putting a lot of trust in a side that aren't quite functioning at their best at the moment. And what's the likelihood that they score 3-4 goals where both Foden and Haaland can return significantly when so many other sides have their talisman ready for me to go and buy? So I did build a wildcard 11 draft, and we'll show it, and I'll talk about the transfer plans for it. Like I said, I'm still confident in City at Brighton to an extent, but I think this is something that I built today for the purpose of potentially going there. Not as high on it as I was in wildcard 10 this time last week, but I thought I'd show you where my head's at in terms of the upside of the fixtures, show you the wildcard, and then we can go back to my alternative strategies. team. So this is what wildcard 11 would look like. And the thing is, yes, it's before an international break. So that is one big deal. What I like about it is, like I said, I get Cunha, I get Solanke and Son, all for this week. Huge upside to target. But is it really worth selling Haaland and Foden? Because I'll also have to feel Palmer and Jackson. Now, I guess the theory is here that there's also no Bruno, who's someone I would really like. And I'd essentially be moving Son to him next week. But then you could just ask, why don't I just sell Jackson, get Bruno for this week? But then where's the midfield spot, right? Because I'd like maybe double United. I think Garnacho as price is really good value. I don't really want to lose Rodgers as well. So there's that. The other thing is this helps me in terms of price rises. I'm definitely going to be slaughtered by them this week and probably lose quite a bit of value by the time we get to 12. And I'm pretty much almost certainly going without Haaland on 12. So could I do it a week earlier and just have the players there and capture the upsides? Yeah, potentially. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get Gabriel out of the side now, mainly because of what I've seen with Marino. I think he's taking up some of his box rate. I'm actually happy to let Gabriel go to an extent, and it allows me to take the upside with Ait-Nouri and Dallo. So I am getting quite a bit of upside this week, as opposed to what I would do in my old team. The old team pretty much only has Haaland and Foden, and that is a bit of a risk considering it's a double up of the same side and they're not in the best of form. So I'd love to hear what you would do in the comments. You guys gave me some great advice last week, and I'd love to hear. This is basically what I'm thinking, though, if I were to wildcard 11 and potentially getting Bruno in there in the form of Jackson. So on the assumption that I wildcard in 12, which I still don't 100% want to do, because I think I can get to Cole Palmer maybe with one hit and restructure the squad basically with one hit overall, and just lose some EV this week, and then I'll be in quite a strong position for 12. And surely that's worth keeping a wildcard over there. But then the counter is you're not really maximizing the squad at the same time. And if you're not going to maximize it now, is there actually a window to do so, even in 14? Am I not losing too much EV in the meantime? So those are the two counter arguments. Now, there's two moves I'm thinking of here. The first is just concert to Ryan Ait-Nouri. Take the Southampton home fixture. Liverpool almost certainly score. I've got Salah anyway to block the upside that I could potentially have from a Conte clean sheet. So, because I wouldn't want Salah to blank, right? So there's that. That's a very sensible option, I think. The other would be taking a hit, and we're going to do some maths here like we did for the Saka captaincy. Gabriel and Calvert-Lewin out, and you would be bringing in Matthias Cunha and Ryan Ait-Nouri. Now, let's assume that I think Chelsea score, which if I'm going to take Gabriel out for as part of a hit, I probably do. 2 points for Gabriel. Let's say I think DCL blanks, which I obviously think if I'm going to take him out, 2. So +4, that's 8, right? So because you're going to... So 2 + 2 for their points, and then +4 because we're going to... Instead of doing -4 to the other side of the hit, I prefer just to put +4 on this side. That's 8 points. And I bring in Ryan Ait-Nouri and Matthias Cunha. Surely, between them, Cunha and Ait-Nouri outscore 8 points. Now, obviously, this is on the assumption that Gabriel and Calvert-Lewin blank both. Let's say I even give them 6 points, like in terms of returns, and I get it up to 14. Okay, 14 points. I think Cunha could haul. He could certainly haul. Even if he gets 1 goal, he's almost certain for 3 bonus. And then can Ait-Nouri keep a clean sheet? Yeah, he can. And even if he doesn't, there's an attacking return there. And I've done it taking the hit, knowing that there's a 6-point return there, which is quite a bit. I've been generous there. So potentially I could justify it. I guess it would make more sense just to go concert to Ait-Nouri, but not having Cunha or Solanke or Son or Brennan Johnson or Bruno Fernandes for next week is a lot of upside that I am potentially missing out on. I'm relatively happy keeping Havertz. I know you could say, oh, you could go Havertz to Cunha, but then I'd still have the DCL issue. And I honestly think it's a pretty decent matchup for Havertz, and Arteta will change the system. But yeah, that's where my head's at with the team. Let me know what you would do. I'd love to hear that. I also think it's great to find some creative solutions. So if you've got anything for me there in terms of -4, -8, please do let me know. If you could find a way where you think I don't have to wildcard 12, I'd also love to hear that. And that's about it. And that is all she wrote for today. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got some value out of it. Please do subscribe if you have not done so already. As you can see, very strong start to the season, up to 120k without a single chip being used. Hopefully the team performs well next week, and then in game week 12, regardless of where or what I do, I should be in a strong position with my team. Very much looking forward to game week 11. Very much looking forward to producing content for you guys for game week 11. So make sure to subscribe, and I shall see you very soon. Goodbye.